So, working in a predominantly white community doesn't necessarily mean that work and diversity doesn't need to take place. If you walk around our community, people will say, we don't have a diversity problem here. And that's the problem, is they can't recognize that just within our community, there are people with so many different identities who don't feel safe in sharing what their identities are, whether they be transgender students or members of the LGBT plus, or obviously families who move into the area or Black or brown and don't feel welcome in the community because they don't see other people who are very similar to themselves. And so working with the Racial Unity Team, which is a civic organization in our town, coming from a social justice background, it was just something that, we believe it should be evident everywhere, that all people should feel welcome in their own community. And if nobody's talking about it, then that told me that that's not how people feel. So,
just to add to that, the schools are changing. They're changing drastically, but what the students need or asking for, and we needed to respond. And this was the correct way to respond, so that we were giving voice to all of our children, so that they got the opportunities that they needed in our classrooms, inside and out. And that was, very telling when we did our first interview with Andres of how important this work was going to be able to meet the needs of all students. And it's slow, but it's the right work.
Yeah, as we all know that, and Dave mentioned that in the presentation that, it's the district that we work in is not the world, and these students will leave Exeter, will leave our district and go and be with other types of people, different personalities, different faiths, different class, different race, different gender identity, and we have to know how to work with different people. So I think that's why it's important that DIJ was brought to the district.
We started having conversations. We needed to hear what their thinking was so that we could talk through that. 2.5 years ago, it was really difficult. We were having a lot of difficult conversations with people who were opposed to this work. That has really started to shift in a downward motion because we've had conversations, and those people who might have been on the fence or hearing one side, they've heard now the other side and understand that this is not just about skin color or gender. It's about everything that we're providing for our kids. And so they found a reason to believe in this work, and that took a lot of different conversations with different stakeholders. So it was less about the politics and just having conversations. We have not changed the minds of everyone, and we won't, but we'll continue to have those conversations. So I think that was the most telling thing, is to bring people in to start the conversation and hear where they're coming from, so we could have the dialogue back and forth.
I think an important thing to remember when you do in this work, you're trying to create a space where everybody feels as though they're going to be respected and heard. And so even in that space where people are coming politically charged, if we're committed to doing the work correctly, then they have to feel safe that they can bring their political agenda and be able to voice that, and then be able to have the conversation in a respectful way. We're not going to be able to change for most people what they believe and what their core values are, but we want to demonstrate to them that we do respect them, even though we don't agree with them. But we also want them to respect and pay attention to what we value as well. And I think that's what Chris was alluding to, is just getting to that place where we're able to have those conversations for the sake of the entire community, so everybody can do that. And that's an important aspect of what we've done.
I would say part of DIJ work is heart work, so even to the people who are politically charged or naysayers, and they might, yell at you or say some negative things to you, it's bringing them in and talking to them, hearing their story. Everyone has a story. There's a reason why they believe what they believe. There's a reason why I believe what I believe, and how did we get to that point? So it's just listening to each other, listening to each other's hearts, and understanding why we got to why we think what we're thinking today. And when we do that, we start to understand each other. Like David and Chris mentioned, we might not agree with each other, but we do understand why we have these beliefs, and that's how we move this work forward.
So the Anti-Discrimination Task Force is a group of school and community members whose sole purpose is to uncover root causes of discriminatory acts. And 3 years ago, our New Hampshire Senate passed a bill that required us to create a plan in response to discriminatory acts that take place in our schools. There were a couple of other elements to their law, but we focused on what are we going to develop for a plan, and how can we do it in a way that's going to be meaningful? And so we constructed the anti-discrimination task force that has been forming and really trying to hone on its real activity, because for a while, so this is the group that did the equity audit of our policy manual, and that took about a year and a half. And then when Andres came on board, he really took charge and kind of they've moved into a different phase now. And I'll let Andres talk about that.
Yeah, so the anti-discrimination task force goal right now is to work on a protocol to deal with bias and discrimination that happens in our schools, in our community. The group is a group of students, teachers, parents from the different districts and communities, community partners, principals, assistant principals, and so on. So we have a representation of voice in this group, thinking about a protocol that would work for our different schools to support our students and our educators dealing with bias and discrimination. So that's our main focus right now, and then to making sure it becomes policy.
And the 7 forms of bias is really a template that we've been using for all the work we've been doing, most specifically with curriculum. And it talks about some implicit biases that we might have as teachers or educators, or books that we use. And it makes us think about, are we using books that talks about all identities of kids? And if not, why are we not using those books? Or how can we use those books? So it's taken a lot of training to walk through that, to understand that, but now it's become the norm that before we introduce new curriculum or we have a lesson, that we think about all the different students that are going to be in front of that teacher, and are we giving them a voice? Are we giving them a visual of what they can connect to, so that it's not discriminating against them or what they see in themselves as it relates to the curriculum. So it's been very powerful to provide that visual for all students in the classroom. It's been really specific around holidays. That's where we've done a lot of work. So we don't talk just about Christmas. We talk about all the holidays that may happen within that month of December. That was an eye-opener for a lot of our teachers, and thinking about different ways that we could express how that's celebrated across in our state, in our classroom, and across the world.
That you're not alone. That there's a network of people who want to do this work because, like I said in the presentation, it's the right work, and our kids have asked for it. So if anything else, listen to students. Listen to what students are saying. When we look at research that's come out just over the last couple of weeks relative to the mental health of our students, the suicide rate for our young girls is through the roof. And a lot of that we've discovered, boys and girls alike, is because they don't have the ability to be who they are and feel safe about it, whether they're at home or whether they're in school. So having people be able to bring their voice to the table means we have to solicit that. We have to create that safe space for them to be able to do that. So if anything else, there's a network of people that really want to do that work. So take one thing, you're not alone, but definitely do the work.
Yeah, and to piggyback on it, that's why we did that opening activity and created those triads, so that they had 2 people, regardless, that they could leave away from this conference to connect about this work. And hopefully it spurred further conversation. So when you saw the wonders at the end, the biggest one is to have more conversations and to educate. So I think the room spoke of what's needed, is that we need more conversations about this, and we need to educate more people. By building, as David said, a network, this work can be done in a greater capacity, and you have other people, when you do hit a pitfall, to be able to call and say, how'd you work through that process?
Yeah, I would say one thing to take away is that 1% matters. That 1% of Black students, that 1% of trans students, that 1% of students lower income, that 1% of students with DLL, that they matter, and they're part of that 100%. So that's why this work is important to do in your districts. That don't look at the numbers and say, well, should we put resources or that towards this? It matters. You should put resources, because that 1% has to succeed like the 99%.